Hi, everyone. I want to talk to you about Jonah today. Jonah is one of my clients who recently landed his dream role after less than 8 weeks with us on the program. Jonah is someone who has been in tech his whole life. He has a massive network. He knows a lot of people. And yet, in this market, he found himself sending out a lot of application after applications, only to just not hear back from them, not getting any callbacks. And I think this is an experience that a lot of you folks watching can probably relate to. I certainly talk to a lot of people who are experiencing something similar. So they know what this experience is like. And so for that reason, I'm super excited for you guys to hear from Jonah himself, learn a bit more about his story, and also what this program has shifted for him. Okay, so let's dive in. First of all, tell me who you are, your background, and how long you've been in the program.
I'm Jonah. I'm a UX researcher. I joined the program, I feel like it was a couple of months, maybe 10 weeks ago, after a long, dry spell in the summer of just not having any particular success with my sending out resumes and
Yeah.
getting
I
no
actually,
response.
I actually looked up when you joined. I think it's just over 7 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But I can imagine that it feels longer, the whole job process.
Yeah. Well, a lot happened in that time.
100%, yes. And I mean, a lot has to happen
Yeah.
for you to get the result that you did, because 7.5 weeks is beyond impressive in this market.
To me, there were sort of two really key, maybe three really key elements that made a difference, right? Like one was literally structural, right? Like the team that you've built up for Nils with resume and Megan for just figuring out like how to think about interviewing and just walking you through the process. And obviously all of your expertise. Those are just like hard skills, like difference in my resume and my LinkedIn profile and the kind of push to write content and be more visible. Those are obviously incredibly important, just kind of pragmatic things. And then I think there's something essentially to the social pressure, right? You're in with a bunch of other folks. I think there's always a little bit of competitiveness isn't wrong because I don't want other people to not succeed. We aren't going for the same jobs, but there's this like, oh, like that person's doing this and this person's doing that. And it's like, crap, if I'm going to get a job, I need to do these things. And it's really nice to have a cohort to gauge yourself against. And then I think the third thing is I will periodically do sport events, right? Like I mean, I'm a reasonably fit person, but every once in a while I like get a wild hair and I'll go to a running race or something, right? And it's sort of like you run casually and then as soon as you fork over, but suddenly it's like the days when you don't feel like running, but you're like, oh, but I made a commitment, right? And so I'm just going to go. And it's like, okay, now I'm sort of obligated to myself to pull through on the days when I was feeling a little bit discouraged or low energy. Like I remember you at one point saying like, this is your job. Like, this is the job that you have now. You got to find a job. And the investment is motivating. And I think the combination of, you now have a stronger tool set. You have this cohort of people that you're working with. You have this professional instruction and you have this whatever pressure that you've put on yourself to like, I got to do this thing. Like I've paid some money. I've made a real commitment to it. And all of that really made a huge difference for me, a huge difference.
Yeah. I love what you just said in terms of you make this commitment and you do it all to yourself. It is a substantial investment for a lot of people. You make the commitment, you're doing some stuff that you've never done before, like
Right.
create content and put yourself out there, right? I love how you express that.
Yeah. I literally just saw, because the Berlin Marathon just ran, and the woman who won was talking about, and she set either a course record or a personal record. I mean, she ran incredibly fast. And she was saying like the morning of the race, she woke up and she was like, I was crying. Like I was like so upset. Like, why did I sign up for this? Why am I doing this to myself? And for her, that's like, to win a major marathon is like hundreds of thousands of dollars at least and a huge career boost. But in that moment, you're just terrified and
Right.
sort of cursing yourself. And
But then
it's
if
obviously
you,
not that painful, but
yeah, yeah,
there
yeah,
were
yeah.
moments where I was like, oh gosh, here we go.
Yeah, but it's an amazing comparison because if she didn't put herself through that, then she wouldn't probably have committed to it as much, not half as much.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Like you have to make it clear to everyone that that's the point, not that it's as painful as training for a marathon.
It's not
Hilarious.
painful, but you do hold yourself to account. I do think there's something important, and I'm sure there's plenty of psychological research to back up that. I mean, it's a commitment device, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, all you have is yourself. You're accountable to yourself, and
Yeah.
you have to look at your finances and all that other stuff. But once you sort of say to you and the rest of your team and your cohort, like, I'm doing this thing, I'm showing up at
Yeah.
these, I'm going to post on LinkedIn, I'm going to go to these meetings, I'm going to listen to this stuff, I'm going
Mhm.
to fix my resume and my LinkedIn. And then even if you don't want to, just going through the motion, it's like starts to build its
Mhm.
own momentum. And then you start to get a little bit, like, you post on LinkedIn and you start to get people. I can't tell you the number of people who have reached back out to me and be like, oh, I saw that thing you put on LinkedIn, like just friends, not even job things necessarily, but just like
Yeah.
reconnecting. I was like, actually, this is this is really great. This is really cool. I'm glad this is happening.
100%.
And I think just the act of writing is like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm starting to see this through line in my
Yeah.
work that I hadn't otherwise paid attention to.
Yeah.
That's really important because you're going to get into interviews and you're going to need to tell your story, right? And
Totally. It really is an interview practice.
it makes
Yeah.
a huge difference, especially if you're doing that in combination with like an LLM where it's giving you feedback on things that you hadn't seen.
I would love for people to have a better idea of where you were at before you even joined the program, what things were there so that they can picture your journey a little bit better. When did you start looking for a new role? And what triggered that decision to start looking?
I got laid off from Cruise, right, along
Mhm.
with the rest of the design team at the end of 2023. My first couple of stabs at finding a full time job right after that were unsuccessful. And then, in a way, it didn't really matter because I was getting inbound contracts. And I was like, oh, I'll just, sure, why not? I'll do contract work. Like, this is fun. And I hopscotched from one contract to another. Some of them were long and some of them were fulfilling and some of them were short and unfulfilling. And basically, while I was on contracts, I wasn't really looking for work. I'd always kind of have my antenna up, but I wasn't being very proactive. I was on a contract for Samsung that ended a little bit earlier than I had originally anticipated. And then just the world went completely quiet. I don't know what happened. My normal social channels were quiet. I don't want this to sound like an ad, but I saw one of your posts on LinkedIn and I was like, all right, I'm just going to look into this a little bit more. And your intake person was like, I'm looking at your background and it's super impressive. And if you're sending out resumes and not hearing anything back, not even no thank you, then you're not getting through these ATS. You're starting with two strikes against you. And in this market, like that, you're never going to get anywhere. And something about the kind of candor and the forthrightness there was like, all right, you're gonna have to take this more seriously. Like, I really have to step up my game. I'm blessed because I was in consulting at IDEO for almost 20 years. I was at Ford, I was at Cruise. I have a really robust social network and I haven't left the Bay Area. So I know literally thousands of people here. And when that was not enough, and it has always been enough to get me to the next thing, and when that stopped, I was like, okay, things are serious and it's going to require a different approach.
So you realize the market has shifted. I remember actually our first conversation where you were saying, I'm not sure that I'm so good at telling my story because I never really had to tell it that much or that
Yeah.
deep. Like, look at it. Like, this is who I am.
And I think one of the other benefits, again, of being part of the cohort and being in the program is it does give you some interesting moments of self reflection, right? I realized that I had just never, except for my job at IDEO in 2000 when I interviewed there, I had since that time never gotten a job from off the street through an interview
Yeah.
process. It always like contract to hire, or my Ford job, I was already working at Ford and I was just like, hey, what if I became an employee? And they were like, oh, that's fine. And then Cruise was contract to hire. I kind of lost confidence. I was like, maybe this just isn't possible.
Speaking of confidence, what was your confidence level when you started seeing that things are not quite the same?
I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's really damaging. It's really, really hard to see all of your friends. I would just sort of like diminish my experience. And then just sending out resumes and not hearing back is very, very hard. One of the things that was very helpful is to be in community with other people who were having those same feelings. But I definitely, when I showed up at your doorstep, was not feeling great about how things were.
Thank you for sharing that because obviously you're not the only one. And so I think it's really important as well for people to hear that. What other resources or help did you try first?
Uh,
And did those work? I mean, I guess
I
not
mean,
because you came to me.
yeah.
So I'm like leading you there.
I didn't try other formal resources. I mean, there was a bunch of things you find on the internet of like, oh, upload your resume and AI will shoot it out for you, but they were just always terrible. What I realized in that call with Nate and just hearing your videos was I needed someone who really understood my story and my journey and who had sort of like walked that path already. And all of these automated tools, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the LLMs and everything else, but if I'm going to tell my story in a way that is like congruent with who I am as a person and the things I want to do, like it needs to be a dialogue, right? Like it needs to be with other people virtually face to face where they're really hearing your story. And I think that's like where the session with Nils and the session with Megan really changed the game for me. First of all, these folks are kind of invested in me. And secondly, it's like, this is my story. This isn't just like a generic, somebody had, wrote some code to figure out how to get past the ATS.
Yeah, totally. I think everybody in this kind of situation, even if they know that they're going to need the help, they want the help, there's still some hesitations to invest in themselves. Do
Yeah.
you remember what your hesitations were and how did you overcome them?
I think part of it was just hubris, and part of it was the thing I was saying before of like, I've got this big network, I've been in industry. How could it be that no one I know is hiring right now, week over week of absolutely nothing? And I was like, this just isn't going to work. I really need to take a different approach. And I really need to be honest with myself about how I'm showing up to potential employers.
Everybody makes their decision so differently. But did you run any potential ROI calculations, like your own emotional or financial math through this?
I think it was more emotional math based on financial math. I was like, okay, like I've got a runway like any sort of business, right? Like I can see what I've got in terms of reserves, and this approach of like kind of leapfrogging from one thing to another and kind of applying for jobs in the background is not cutting it. I mean, I'm not a very numerically focused person. I do qualitative research, right? I'm a more of an emotionally driven person, but you don't need to be a math PhD to sort of look at my situation and be like, this, sir, it's time to come to grips with yourself, right? You have to take another approach.
How did you know that it's going to work for you?
I don't know that I ever had certainty. What gave me confidence again was the fact that you and I have a shared background. And I was like, okay, like at least this person isn't trying to get me a job as a coder or a quant or something. You know what I mean? We're coming from the same place. That was confidence inspiring. For what it's worth, Nils is a very pragmatic, not very emotional person. But in a way, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of what you need, right? You need somebody to just be like, your story sucks. And here's how it gets better. That was
Totally.
entirely what I needed.
That's the approach that I want for my clients.
When it's perfect, right? I see that's a very different way of thinking about it. And then he gives you the tools and the method to go forward and do it for yourself. I did a compare and contrast between my resume and my LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, what was I thinking, right? Like my LinkedIn is now terrible. Even Claude was looking at my IDEO history, which is a very complicated story to tell. And was like, this is a mess. Claude said that. And I was like, okay, this is bad.
That's hilarious.
But then I think just kind of going through the steps, I think a lot of it again is just like every day you get up and do the things, right? And like strength, people talk about, oh, they're so strong. In my opinion, it's not so much about being sort of superhuman. It's about having the sort of gumption to just do the next thing and then do the next thing and then do the next thing. And just kind of like, don't get overwhelmed by the length of the journey. Take the next step and then take the next step. And once it starts to build a little bit of momentum, each additional step becomes a little bit easier.
And it feels better to do that work as well if you know that you're being guided, that you are actually putting the effort towards the right direction.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And you can get help. It's like, no, don't do that. Do
Exactly.
this. Right. And then those steps start to feel really productive. And again, you also have your cohort to kind of reference off of, right? It's like, oh, they're doing that. And that person just got a job. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to overstate. And in a way, like there was no like magical moment. It was just the cumulative effect of 50 little things turn into the thing that kind of like gets you there.
Yeah. And I think people often romanticize stuff. That's literally how the biggest stuff gets done. you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. Just keep grinding.
totally. What would you say was the biggest mind shift or strategy shift from your previous approach?
The biggest shift for sure was, and I knew this intuitively, but I was not doing it, of talking about yourself to thinking about standing in the shoes of the person who want to hire you and say, how do my skills in my experience, add up to solving your problems. It sounds really simple. It's like, obviously, but then like most people, if you look at their resume and their cover letter, it's always like, look at how great I am, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, actually, that's like, no one cares because there's always someone who's greater, right?
Exactly.
Always.
And it shows in interviews when you take that approach
Yeah.
that it's
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
about how great you are, but it's about what a great fit you might be.
Right. And being really curious about who you're talking to, right? I mean, this is where being a researcher helps. It's your kind of natural posture, right? Of like, what is it like to be in your shoes? And what are the things that you worry about? And, people won't tell you a ton, but the idea that you want to know their story and the implicit sort of thing there is like, I want to know your story so that I can make sure that I'm being helpful.
Exactly. I love that. We talk about how damaging the experience is in terms of reaching out to folks, not hearing back, not being able to leverage your existing network, applications, feeling like just sending it into the void. That's damaging for your confidence, right? And so we spoke about that earlier. I was wondering in terms of going through the process and now obviously landing a role, landing multiple roles, really landing that role within less than 8 weeks. How would you say has that restored your confidence?
It absolutely has to be in a pattern and have the normal dialogue and just be contributing to something important instead of getting up in the morning. It does radically shift everything back to some sort of equilibrium. Like, I'm a contributing member of society. I can think about going on a vacation. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much stuff that you don't even really realize that you sublimate when you're in the job hunt mode, that you suddenly breathe a little easier and think a bit more expansively.
That really resonates with me, especially the part about being able to do things again, because your life is a little bit on hold while this process is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask my 14-year-old who has been waiting for an extraordinary amount of time for me to buy him a very expensive bicycle. And I've just been like, I keep pushing him off and I keep pushing him off. And now he's like, okay, when, because I made a commitment to him. Is like, if I land a full-time role, I'll get you this thing that you've been asking for like, I
Oh,
don't
I
know, a
love
year and a
that.
half.
I love that so much. Okay, so it's not just your win, it's his win too. I love that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So the average time that it takes someone right now in tech to get a role that they like,
Yeah,
it's still 12 to 15 months, as painful as it sounds, but that's the stats. And you did it in the program in less than
yeah,
8 weeks, right? So I counted the
yeah,
time from the date you joined to the day that you said, hey, I just signed.
yeah.
That's 7.5 weeks. What would you say helped you beat that odds?
In part, I was very primed. Right? I knew where I wanted to go. I was very laser focused on, and again, this is the work that you did. It was like, you got to change your LinkedIn to tell the world and set an intention of like, I'm going to be doing this, right? So my LinkedIn background thing, which used to just be like a fun picture of me, is now like, I do AI, physical and embodied AI and robotics, right? And I just set that intention and I didn't
Yes.
take no for an answer. I was like, I got to get this job. I just have to get this job. And I just would not have had the confidence to push that hard had it not been for the time that I spent with the cohort.
Yeah. And you know what I would have said anyway if you asked me, like, oh, cute. So there's this friend, but he's out of the door going on vacation. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Ask him to hang up the phone and call them.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I absolutely love hearing that because it really comes down to what's most important in winning this game. It's getting your mindset straight, putting the intention out there and just go after it,
yeah,
which is why I always say if I was to look for a job, even without using my connections, I would probably find a job in 2, 3 weeks. And not
right,
because I'm so arrogant or whatever. I'm not going to use my network, but it's just
right.
because I'm going to push. I'm going to do what's needed to reflect that urgency and the
Yeah.
importance that I have around that. Last question I have for you, Jonah. What do you think you would tell someone who is a bit on the fence and maybe thinking, oh, maybe I try it on my own first?
If you really are going to be serious about it, you should align yourself with experts. And there's a little bit of like, yeah, check your ego at the door. I mean, I've been in the industry for 30 plus years or whatever, but my job was to do my job, not to find a job.
Right.
And you folks are experts in finding a job. And that's a totally different skill set. I mean, there was a little bit of like, am I embarrassed or whatever? I don't know. But I was like, I should be able to figure this out. But the truth is, and you said this, right? It's a completely separate set of activities, like the finding of work. And we don't practice that. I mean, unless you've been good at like hopping around, but I was not. I spent 20 years in one
Yeah,
place. I think the real power of it is get professional help. If you're going to want professional results, you need professional help. Most people are not that professional help for themselves.
100%. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Jonah. I just want to say thank you for being an amazing client, for an amazing person to work with. I love that you've come into our program, come into our lives, and you've been a blessing to our community as well.
It ends up being so much more. And I think a lot of it is the credit belongs to you for building a great team, for continuing to be an inspiring and not like pushy. Like you kind of strike that right tone between like business and it's fine. So the pleasure was really mine. Obviously, it's great to get a role and to like do all the things, but these lessons will persist. And even in coffee chats with friends, with other friends who are in the same position, I don't know that I get like full referrals yet, but I've talked to people and you can feel them sort of like warming up to this idea of like, oh, okay, maybe I should think about that. So,
Yeah, that
you
would
know,
be amazing. And stay in touch. Don't be
yeah,
a stranger. Thanks so much, Jonah. You take care.
yeah, you too. Take care. Bye bye.